we have such a short time together, and we all have our ego rationale, if you want to call it that, of why we've come, and there's a great deal of sacrifice and time and effort, and you're out of your comfort zone to just to be here. I look at what actually brings us here, what the truth of it that actually brings us here. And what we're looking for, whether we really know that or not, whether that's conscious, is in this incarnation, we come for really two reasons. One is to realize who you are, the totality, as Jen was saying yesterday, the wholeheartedness, the wholeness of who you are. And the other is resolution with what has not been resolved in this incarnation or maybe previous incarnations. And then we have this great palette of possibilities and experiences and creations, and it's just this glory that we get to explore and dance and express. We can look at the earth, and some calls it the great veil of tears. We can look at it in another way, and it's the great blessing of the human body. The Tibetans call the human body the greatest gift in the cosmos that you can receive. And I used to wonder about that. I thought, oh, wow, I don't know about that. Seems like it's pretty much of a challenge to live in the human body and in the human experience. But the more you begin to dive into actually what brings you to this beautiful planet we call our Mother Earth, and what brings us in a certain family unit and a certain culture and a certain race, a certain color of skin, a certain religion, a certain situation, and you begin to see that there is this common life force that illuminates every body, every tree, every mountain, every river, everything that there is. If you really see what the actuality is, it's like all of these are like images of mind. And these images of mind have been illuminated with this life force. And if you've ever been with someone that has passed, and you see them in their passing, and even though there may be a great deal of fear or suffering, or there can be a great deal of beauty and peace and insight, but there's this life force, even though the body is ready to let go. But the second that life leaves, it's totally apparent, right? Isn't it? I mean, you've done much of your young life with those transitions. So the question is, and when I was really contemplating about, our time together, and we talked about that we really wanted to explore embodied love and to really look at that deeply. And in this very short period of time, extraordinarily short period of time, we want to be able to dive into what every human being, without exception, desires and wants in their life. There is no exception to that. I don't know if you ever paid any attention to the images that were coming out of Hungary, I don't know how many years ago, quite some time ago, and of the orphanages and these babies that were, abandoned and left in orphanages, and they're like these little wizen, pale, skinny babies. They don't even really look like children. And they're each put in this little crib and, given the bare necessities, but no love. And you could see that they were either, there's been many instances that these children die from the lack of love. Or you can see the opposite. You can see these young children that are, in my generation, that was when women were actually choosing to have children or not. And, of course, some of us, it slipped up on us anyway. We kind of accepted it after the fact, Thank God for nature, that you accept what you didn't plan. But what I'm trying to say is many of my friends were professional women. And, they had traveled all over, and, they were older when they had their children. And they adored their children. They had so many rules, you wonder how anyone ever survived the rules and how it should be. But anyway, young mother, I was young mother. I was just so dumb, that I just sort of, okay, let's go to the lake, let's do this, And that we all trumped off to some place or the other. So I didn't have many rules. But anyway, I would look at these children that were just adored. And you could see out of their crown, and there was this shine coming out of their bodies. You can probably see that, Shuli, with your children. It's like, because they were so loved. And so that openness to the support and the beauty and the love that pours into each and every one of us. We are literally wired up and designed to be receptors of this divine love that pours into our being and into our system. But because of training and background and misunderstandings with our parents who just simply didn't have the capability of showing that because it wasn't awake within them, it's on one way, it's really quite innocent. And so to realize that not only is this body the receptor of the divine that's pouring into the crown, the top of the head, that's the energetic anatomy, if you want to call it that, we're made up to that, right? Just as we draw from the dark fundamental ground, the ground of everything, the silent I. There is no exception to that. And so there are these, channels that move literally within the spinal column that are receiving and giving and, reharmonizing and receiving again. And the only thing that doesn't allow that experience of being profoundly and completely awake and saturated with love is conditioning that has taught us otherwise. It's either with parents that just simply didn't have the capability because that wasn't an experience that they received, or sometimes they were perhaps conditioning from the parents that had such strong ideas of what you deserved to be loved and what you didn't deserve to be loved. And for some that was, to be very academically, proficient, and for others it was to be, very, have a good career and marry well and, have a lot of money and income. And, so it was according to the conditioning of the parental family that you came up in. My sense is, and I don't know about you, but probably you've spent an awful lot of your early time anyway trying to receive love in some form or the other, right? And so for some it was being very beautiful, attractive. For others it was being, like those gorgeous birds, that they have these elaborate feathers and fans, and and so we do the same thing. We have these like cool cars. When you were a teenage girl, that was kind of groovy if you were with a boyfriend that had a cool car. And then when you get older, it's like a beautiful home, or a beautiful bank account, or my husband or my wife now is a doctor, whatever. That's that fluffing up the nest to draw in love, acceptance and admiration. And so here, I was raised in a very isolated family that my mother was a very loving and wonderful and beautiful and kind woman, but just very, very depressed and a sense of great lack and, no power and not able really to live in the life that she wanted. And so she lived in this kind of a dream of what she wanted and comparing it to what she had. And of course, there was always an extreme, lack. So we just sort of, as our family unit, I had a sister and then a stepbrother, we just sort of lived in our own worlds and made that, our life. We didn't really have a mother or a father who most of us didn't, but we thought we should have, that was loving and kind and supportive and whatever. So there was this sense of I was looking for love, and like many young women, I tried to find it, in my body and sexuality and attracting, people that were attracted to me, and that was a sort of a kind of a trying to draw love. And then when I became older, I thought, well, I'll do it through Christianity. That didn't work out so well. I loved Jesus and I loved God, but I couldn't find it, in the church. And then I went through the whole thing of the New Age, what's her name, the Hayes? Pardon? Louise Hayes, right? I tried that, and I tried affirmations, and I went to a therapist for a little while, and it was in the 70s, and I was so miserable. I was just in a constant state of depression. And so I tried the whole housewife thing, and I just couldn't get into it. It's like I had a German mother-in-law, and she ironed my husband's like skivvies, those white shorts, and sheets, and we would have these Tupperware parties. I mean, this was in the 60s, right? The late 60s. And we'd sit around and we'd like, Tupperware, and I was just like, I couldn't get it. I tried to read all housekeeping and the Red Book, and all that stuff that you were reading, and I couldn't get it. I just couldn't get into it. Right? So I was so miserable. And, of course, I kept it all very internally. So I went to a therapist, and he was a Rogerian therapist. I don't know if anyone knows what that was, but I just said, fix me. I can't do this. I can't live this way. I don't know how to be a housewife. I'm not serving my children. I'm miserable, and yeah, good luck. Maybe, yeah, just shut the door. And he just looked at me and he said, I wouldn't fix you for any amount of money in the world. You are absolutely, totally wonderful who you are, and you will find that at a certain point. And that was the first and the last time I went to a therapist. My therapy was meditation. My sister, who was, at one point, she's what everyone would want as a mother, loving, kind, patient, whatever. And, but she became suicidal. And so she knew she couldn't go that way. So she went to therapy for 6 or 7 years. And I started to meditate quite intensely about that time. And, 6 or 7 years later, we kind of came out, reasonably whole. So it doesn't really matter which form that you take. You know, it's just to unfold the deep patterns that say, I have to close myself off to what I am. I have to become something different, something more, and something less to be okay. You know, it doesn't really matter whatever way that you find that helps to kind of unpack or unlock those patterns that, you know, they're just like packed in together, that pushes away what you want the most. And that voice that goes into your head that says, you know, I need to be this, and I need to be this, and I'm not. So therefore, you know, whatever those words that, you know, are in most everyone's heads until you start to really look at it. What I began, though, to see, and that's what I would like to perhaps just at least invite, is you aren't going, wow, he's great. I mean, that cat, he's the cat walk. Woo! He's a tomcat. I really like him. I mean, he's really feisty, but boy, I like him. So, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is you can try, you know, you can try therapy, you can try meditation, you can try, you know, I did a lot of breath work. Have any of you done the breath work? You know, it's very powerful. You know, a lot of people do, you know, psychedelics, they do different kinds of medicine, and that brings, you know, those patterns to the surface. It makes you conscious of those patterns that are pushing away actually what you are. Not only what you are, but what you're made up of. Each cell in the body is made up of love. And we're walking around going, where's love? I don't have love. I want to love, you know. Give me the perfect husband, the perfect wife, the perfect job, the perfect body, the perfect whatever, you know. And here we are, a receptor of love. We're energetically wired up to receive and to be loved, and each cell is made up of love. Sunday school got that right. God is love. They interpreted it bizarrely. But the truth was there, right, you know? And but I think what all of that is kind of like a precursor, right? You know, you kind of lighten the load a little bit by doing all of these different, you know, practices. I'm like a lover of healers. And so I would go to healers, you know, time after time after time. And there would be great recognitions and great insights and great openings, you know, on the table of healers. Or in meditation, when I began to go be involved with meditation. You know, you'd sit long enough, your body would hurt enough, you would go through, you know, silent days enough, and something would start to arise. Something would start to reveal itself. And I would do anything for that. You know, whatever I could afford, how much I could get away, whatever, I would walk through the Sahara Desert if I had to have that realization of what I am. But I still thought that it was something that was away from me. You know what I'm talking about? They were experiences. And for many, there was a sense of, and I'm sure you all can understand or have experiences, I've got it, I've lost it. Right, it's the spiritual's mantra. Until you figure it out, you know, that it's impossible to lose it, that actually what's arising that blocks it out is love itself, saying, here, sweetheart, you know, look at this. This is a dream that you had when you were 2 years old. and you couldn't process it when you were 2, and so we're going to lovingly put it away in some part of our body-mind structure, and when it's possible, we're going to reveal it. And we're going to reveal it in your life, in the moment. And if you can receive that, if you can see that it's an act of love, and that love is, its function is to burn and dissolve and to free, not manage or make better, free of these deep-seated places of pain that actually are only memory. That's all they are. They're images held in time and space until our consciousness is open enough and bright enough that we can say, oh, and then it's let go. It's seen through. It's permeated. So there is like a benefit, of course, of, you know, therapy or breath work or body work or yoga, you know, all of these sort of wonderful modalities that can help free up and create a little bit more space. But in this world, and from what I've observed over many, many years with working with, you know, lots and lots and lots of different people, is you have to come out of your personal self. There's like when you wake up, there's a recognition, and the teachers will all tell you in the sutras and the poetry and the sacred writings, they'll say, you know, the me cannot wake up. It's not possible. That's not what the me is. You wake up out of the me. There's an ascension that happens. And I don't mean flying out of your body and never coming in and living in some kind of a bliss mode, but you literally come out of this orientation called me, and you see the reality of who you are, and it has always been true. It will always be true. It is immovable. It does not change. It is not stained. You know, the Tibetans call it, you know, the great stainless. That it's untouched. And you see yourself as that. You know, since I was a child, you know, I had a lot of visions and popping out and golden realms and, you know, all this stuff. And, you know, it was really quite lovely. And that was part of my life. And then in meditation, you begin to have many, 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 many different experiences over time. And, you know, you kind of come out, and then, you know, you dust off and go back to your daily life, and then you've lost it. So then you try to, what's the next retreat, you know, I can sign up for. But when the essential shift happened, and what I mean is like, this was the identity, and now this is the identity. And it's night and day. There's no comparison. And so when that happened, that was the first thought that came through. It's like, all the teachers were right. The me cannot be awakened. It's an impossibility. And that's the last thing you try to hold on to. If I just become better, if I just meditate longer, if I just whatever, I'm going to then wake up and that's it, and all is well, and everything is groovy, and everyone will love me, I will love everyone else, and fill in the blanks, right? So with the recognition of love is the very same. You have to come out of the old role and ideas of what love is. What it's going to do for you, what you're going to do for someone else if you're wired up that way, how your life is going to be, what it's going to solve. You know, all of these, and most are quite unconscious. You really don't know what you're trying to grab and what you're trying to push away and what you're trying to, you know, gather in and to make happen. You really don't understand in most cases what those motivations and how your life is wired up to receive love, to be whole, to be loved, to be loving, we really all want to be loving as well. You know, it's one channel. Have you noticed? You know, all the teachers, especially in the Mahamudra Tibetan teachings, it's all about compassion, and it's all about service, and it's all about, you know, your enlightenment then is given as, you know, for all beings. And that's a beautiful movement. But what I see with most that are receiving those teachings, it's this person that's going to do these perfect, you know, retreats and 10,000 prostrations and, you know, all of this, and I'm not putting it down. But it's like the person is going to be somebody after all of this is accomplished, right? That's usually how it works. But the reality is what everyone actually does discover is you come up out of the idea, the needs, the role, the should not, and you come into the realization that you are love. You are made up of love. And not only are you made up of love, but everyone else is more or less conscious. And this floor and this ceiling and this air, all is actually love. Love is the creative expression of the silent I. You know, like Jen calls it, it's the she. It's the creatrix. It's the great mother. And again, it has nothing to do with gender. Nothing to do with gender at all. It's just that this is the pregnant creation. This is the pregnant expression. That's why being somewhere like here, it's so alive. I mean, if we don't get the creatrix here, I don't know where we're going to get it, right? You know, you sit down and eat and you go, oh my God. Talk about beauty and abundance and love, you know, it's all love. So there is a coming out of the personal self, even though you're a loving person or you're not a loving person, and you see it as it is. Just like when the essential shift, when it goes from the personal separate identity into the whole being. That me did not do that. You can't make yourself a loving person. I mean, my sister, you know, was this wonderful, amazing, loving human being, but she also was suicidal. You know what I'm saying? And for me, you know, we came out of the same kind of childhood and background, and I was, you know, a spiritual seeker and an adventurous, right? Neither one of us achieved what we really wanted. We were expressing our own unique dharma, but, you know, we weren't experiencing love. I remember the first time, actually, and I was at a retreat in California with my teacher, Aja, and it was a 10-day retreat, and we were in this beautiful, it was a Tibetan center, and, you know, California is so beautiful, you know, I love California, except you can't drive or you have to stand in line everywhere you go. And I love California, right? And so we're in the middle of this, you know, redwood forest, and there's this creek, you know, and it's gorgeous and whatever. So I'm just sitting there, and maybe 3-4 days in, and I don't know about you if you've gone to several retreats, there's kind of a timing. You know, the first day you're getting used to it and you ache all over and you hate it and everything is not working out right. The second day, you know, you're into like all your stuff is coming up and you can't stand that person next to you and you just say, breathe one more time, you know, it's just like, you know, and then the third day you're kind of like settling in and things are, you know, starting to be okay. And then usually right around that time, then there's something that starts to, you know, birth. Come out of the neurosis and the tightness of our, you know, personal junk beliefs. So I'm sitting there, you know, and on a bench and just kind of grooving, and my husband walks by. And I don't know, I think just, my connection to him, my love of him. And the whole thing just woke up. The whole thing. And I saw literally, not conceptually, experientially, that there was nothing that was not love. Nothing. The floor, the house, people, the redwoods. I ran over to the toilet, those little honeypot toilets, whatever, and that's made up of love too, I was just like, wow, even that, there was nothing that was not. And of course it was like, whoa, everything. And this body was made up of that, and it was like moving and dancing and flowing and experiencing itself as this love. And here's this personality searching everywhere, wanting it so badly. And we were made up of love. It had nothing to do with I love my poodle, or I love chocolate, or I love my husband, or I don't love my husband according to what mood I'm in that day, or what's being triggered. It has nothing to do with any of that. And so that glimpse, and about 12, 24 hours later, it started to kind of come back to the habit of mind. That's what happens when you leave a retreat or you have, these great recognitions. It isn't like you're losing it, it's just that the habit of mind is stronger at that point than the revelation. That's the only difference. That's the only difference. And finally you start to get on it. And the more that's seen, and that's what I'm trying to get across here. Does everyone need a break, or am I kind of missing something? Okay. That's fine if, you take care of yourself. It finally starts to get spacious enough. You've had enough glimpses. You actually start to relax around this holding on to the old image of who you thought you were. And it just sort of automatically, spontaneously starts to happen. And the more space and the more openness and the more kind of ease and relaxation and a kind of a trust, and it's not a blind trust, it's a trust of actuality. You've actually have seen it how it is. You may not be able to fully embody it at that point, and that's an ongoing opening and revealing. But it's a kind of a faith. There's a shift. It's a tipping point. And over here, you still think you're a person with this history, and you're bound by this history, and you have to compensate because of this history, and you do all sorts of things because of this history. And then the more you see, and it isn't like Sharon sees it and gets it. It's more accurately, awareness itself starts to recognize itself in this body structure. Do you get the difference? We keep thinking it's a Sharonness that's getting it. It isn't actually true. It's more and more and more of awareness or love or the great spirit or the great being, whatever you want to call that, becomes more and more prominent. And then there's a certain tipping point, and that tipping point is you're taken. And what I mean by that is that the love and the spirit and, the pure awareness is more in the background, and it starts to become much more prominent. And there's a shift, and you often don't even know it until it's like in hindsight. And then it becomes prominent, and you start to live your life from that. But it wasn't Sharon now that's awakened. It's awareness it's now prominent. Life is being perceived more purely from pure spirit or pure awareness itself. And the mind and the ego structure, in a certain way, gets on board. And it starts to collaborate, and it starts to support what actually awareness is revealing, as awareness is revealing itself. Do you get that? That's a real major misunderstanding. And it takes a long time for it to be kind of burnt through. And then, the way knows the way. And something relaxes into that. And so if you show up in some ungodly place and, you hate where you are and, it's miserable and you can't stand the teacher and you can't stand the person around you and, the whole thing, you go, what is this? What actually is happening here? We have an idea that love is like, oh, I love you so much. You're so sweet. You can just do anything you want to do. And that's just fine with me because I'm a loving person. Right? We all had that one. I was a failure. I could not pull that baby off. I'd try. One time I took my poor daughter to a Sufi camp. And I had, more experience, the Buddhist, and the different kind of, the native medicine teachings and the different things. But I thought, well, I'm not a loving person. I'm sort of I'm more held back and, I can't show that. And my personality is kind of defensive, and I'm just not a loving person. So I'm going to go to the Sufi camp, right? So I dragged Shayla to the Sufi camp, and everyone is just so loving, and you'd put them on their lap, and they would hug, and then you could see that there was this woman, and her husband was loving someone else, and so she was trying to love the husband and the new lover, and she was, what's that thing in the Paul about what is love? She'd stand up and she'd repeat what is that, Corinthians? What is that? What love is? Love is patient. Love is kind. And I was just going, oh. I mean, it was just so fake. At least that was my perception at the time. And we'd do these dances, and it was helpful because you could look at each other's eyes. And when you gaze, you actually do see the reality, of who you are. So, gazing was fun, We were out in by a lake. But I saw two things. I saw the teacher turn to light. So whatever was coming through him was real. And I saw how it was very genuine. Everyone was really attempting to be as loving as they possibly could be. They really were. It was me being kind of cynical and a little too Buddhist or something. I don't know what it was. So there's and I'll use this word in a kind way, there's a stink when people are fake, right? And you can kind of feel it, and you kind of want to go. It's kind of slimy or something. I don't know what it is. They call it the Zen stink. When, they act like Zen guys, they walk around and they say these silly little jokes, and that's supposed to be a Zen joke. And, they arrange their shoes perfectly. It takes them about 10 minutes to get the shoes arranged this way. So it's not that, right? It's just not that, right? It's just not that. It's something that arises and it includes. And it's something that touches, and it touches who you are, right? When you start to really get that you don't end at this skin, you are that is awake in the space as you are that is awake in this body structure. This is as awake. And so when you start to be with each other in a real way, this essence connects to this essence, and then it dances in the uniqueness. it enjoys it, or maybe it doesn't enjoy it. You don't have to enjoy everybody. You don't. I've tried. Believe me, I've given it my whole heart. But I also get at this point that this essence and this essence is the same essence. I do get that. And so, you use your life as your practice. So many people, they go to retreats, they do this, they do that, and then they just go home and they just do the same old thing. That will not work. It does not work. Every moment is an opportunity. Every moment is an opportunity to be who you are and to find out how you're not being true to yourself. That's as, if maybe even more beneficial. What's not true that's coming out of your mouth. And it isn't that you're a bad person, you're just seeing what you're making aware when you're lying. Or you see, I'm sure you're aware, it's a beautiful, aware community here, so, or you wouldn't be here. So you can be aware of your thoughts, and some of us are in the positive thought crowd, and some of us are in just be with the way it really is crowd, And of course, it's neither this nor that. But when you start to realize that when you're open and looking and seeing and actually hearing what's happening, you're not in some unconscious dream somewhere, then you start to make aware what is not true. And believe you me, you will be shocked at some of what you see. And it isn't that you want to judge that, it's just like, oh my God, no wonder that situation didn't work out. I was at war. I thought I got married. I actually was at war. Do you hear what I'm trying to say? So the practice is, and it's still a practice that I'm working with, and it's been some years, is when I'm with someone, and I like people. I enjoy people. I think, you can show me your photographs of your family, and I think they're cool, and, and tell me stories about how you were growing up and your background, and I like it. I like people. I'm interested. I'll be with friends and we'll go somewhere and people will, for God's sake, Sharon, you talk to everybody. But I'm interested. I think, stories and people are interesting. But I hadn't connected to we are of the same essence. I hadn't connected to that. Now, if you're interested, that's an opening, right? You're naturally, interested. But I just started to work with that energetically for years. And it still is not a way that I function and move through the world. You hear what I'm saying? If this essence is beating this heart, and this essence is in this space, this essence is in there and beating this beautiful heart, and this beautiful heart, and this beautiful heart. We are all in this together. People, when the whole COVID thing hit, people would say, we're all in this together. How often did you see that to be true? It really wasn't. It brought out actually the exact opposite. The earth and everything that's happening on the earth. And we can tell you all the statistics, but are we making our choices? We're in this together. This is our mama. But we're acting like, it isn't true. because we don't believe that we're interconnected. We really don't believe that. And that's really profound and beautiful, spiritual and heartful people. I, for a while, was doing it was called oh God, I'll think of it in a minute. But it was different people that came together in our community, and we each had certain interests and skills. So we broke off into these, groups or committees, whatever you would call them, and then we tried a resiliency. It was a resiliency community, and trying to decide what we could do to help the communities be more self-sufficient, basically. Where's your electricity, where's your water, where's your food, where's your, your gardens and all of that. So I was, I'm a gardener, and I really love to grow food, and all my baskets are full of rice and beans, and I do all these odd things that probably most of you do too, but anyway. And I have never ran into so much resistance, opinions, rules, ideas, fear. It was theories, missions. I was just shocked. I said, all we're talking about is getting some land together that we can grow some food. It was unbelievable. I hung in about 4 or 5 years, and I thought, I'm just not made up for this. I'm not patient enough. And finally, my co-partner, she ended up creating something beautiful, and, it worked out. But I thought, it's just not my thing. But I was shocked. What are we talking about? We're talking about food, water, an alternative source of electricity. We kind of believe that electricity is going to, keep on forever. You might want to look at that one. We're going to be plugged in. Have you read Lights Out? Anyone read Lights Out? He was a journalist. What's his name? Ted Kaplan. And he was 75 when he wrote the book. And he just said, I could not die and not write this book. And he'd done all of this, research and everything for, forever. He was one of the good journalists. And he just said, we have one source of electricity that everything else is hooked into. And in Europe and the United States and Canada, one source. That baby goes, the whole thing goes. And he says it's just a matter of time. Now, I don't know whether this is true or not. There was the one little chapter, and they said, except the San Luis Valley, which is the poorest community in the United States, that's where we live. And they were so poor they couldn't hook up to that same system. I don't know if any of that's true. But you know what I'm saying? We're interconnected, and the love sometimes says no. Like that, right? You do that with the kid. Have you ever watched the big cats and their kittens or their cubs are going all over them and, pulling on them and, drinking and falling over and then all of a sudden they'll just go, that's it, baby. And there's no, well, I shouldn't ever, what's it loving, they just stop, right? And so your life will do that to you. The old classic, are you going to be hit over the head with a little tap, or are you going to need a hammer? Because if you start to open up, and it isn't you opening up, it's awareness is moving in your life, and it's going to take your life. Now, it may happen in this incarnation, or it may happen a few carnations down the road. But it is a done deal. So that's why it's so important. Why are you here? The mind will go, well, da-da-da-da-da. Well, and that's relevant. But it's love, it's awareness, it's the great beauty, it's the great intelligence, it's the source of everything that is waking up in each and every one of us and says, what's true? What's reality? What's the fundamental of everything? The root, the silence, that's the fundamental. It does not move. It is constant. It does not change. That's why it's so vital that you recognize that. That's why that was so beautiful when you recognize that, my friend. That's the fundamental. Very few recognize that. So the fundamental is imperative. It's like knowing where you come from. It's knowing your root. It's knowing what remains. It knows it is not born. It does not die. There's a beautiful teacher, a Japanese teacher called Bankei, and he calls it the unborn. And that's what he's pointing to. It's the same. It's the constancy. You know, it's the I, the silent I, that is within all things, within all change, within all movement, within all creation, within all dying. It's the stability. And when that begins to wake up, then we're open to this life that actually is fluid and spacious. It's not fixed. We keep trying to fix it. I get up at a certain time in the morning and I only eat 3 things and I do this and then I do that. And that's fine. There's not a problem with that. It makes the ego and the body kind of happy. It's like an animal that you live with, right? They like to get up at the same time. They come and they meow and they want to be fed right now in that, or they want to walk at a certain time, you know, or a baby, you know, they're happy when there's a schedule. But it's not who you are. You're this open, energetic, alive, vibrant source of life and love and wisdom, and it's like moving. You're moving through space. This is not solid. It's like this. I mean, even the scientists have figured that out. You know, the yogis figured it out, you know, like 10,000 years ago. Everyone goes, well, I'm really a follower of science now. Well, great, you know, there's a good purpose to that. But, you know, you all you have to do is look inside. You're fluid. Everything is fluid. What's the deal? Maybe you remember, Tim, remember facts better. But you're actually made up of space, and then it's like 1,000% is actually matter. I mean, it's amazing, right? But we only believe in matter if it's like proved, you know. So you just start to open up to what actually is. There's this one constancy, this pure awareness that's pouring through every cell of your being. And then it's experiencing itself in this fluidity, this movement, this creation, this destruction, this birth, death, expression of itself in a myriad of forms. I am enlightened by the 10,000 things. That's what it's pointing to. And so love begins to take over and to wake up. It's within every cell. It isn't like something achieves something. It's just the attention goes away from the lack into actually what is, which is each cell is made up of love. It's made up of the dark ground, the silent I, and it arises and creates itself as love. And every cell within your body is singing that reality. And it's an uncovering of it, of rigidity and beliefs and ideas and reactions and grasping that doesn't allow that to fully be known, to be lived, to be recognized. So you can't make yourself better and more loving. That's great. You know, it's nice to be around a more loving, kinder person, for sure. But the way is you come up out of the person, a loving, nice person, or a real, you know, person, a really angry person, a really sad person, someone who really has an extreme sense of lack. It doesn't matter. You come up out of that role and beliefs and ideas and compensations, and there you are. That's love. And then you begin to move and open to where there is unconsciousness and fear and compensation and control, rather than try to come up with some kind of managing strategy or some kind of a control or some kind of an idea or ideal. You give it over to love. Let love reveal itself. That's the surrender. You know, so many times spiritual personalities think of surrender as like, oh, I'm going to surrender. You know, we all thought that that's what we were supposed to do. What's surrender? I have no idea what surrender actually is. Surrender is the recognition of what has become confused, what has been pushed out of the lap of the mother, whatever way you want to see that, and you just give it over to love. Let love reveal itself. I'm going to tell another quick story and then I'll stop. We were having a little, I don't know what you want to call it. Anytime you get a bunch of spiritual people together, anyone together, you know, it's going to fluff up the feathers, right? And so we had a little blip in the Sangha, you know, some kind of a change and transition was going on. And so I'd gone on a trip with my husband, and I was talking to him about it, you know, I don't know what to do about it. I don't know how to be with that, you know, I don't know. And so he listens, you know, and so I have a dream. And it was the night of Valentine's Day. I thought it was so cool. But anyway, so in the dream, there was these spiritual personalities, and of course I was included in that. And we were trying to be loving, you know, be aware, try to work it through, try to hear each other, you know, all these, you know, wonderful things. If you're going to believe you're a separate person, you might as well try to be a good person. But what I could see was underneath, there were these unimaginable, powerful, infinite waves. Love. And love was working it through. Love was bringing it to the surface. Love was drawing up insight, clarity, interconnectedness, perfectly. And I went, ah. You give it over to the great being. You give it over to love. You give it over to, you know, if you're a Christian, maybe it's the Christ. If, you know, if you're a Buddhist, Buddha mind, you know. I just go right down to the nitty-gritty, which is the creatrix and the foundation of everything, which is love. But it's so, we've made it so shallow. We don't really get it of what it is. And sure enough, I got home and something happened and something opened up and something revealed itself, and, you know, it was perfectly fine. The way knows the way. So after a while, you just stop trying to strategize and figure it out and make things happen and not make things happen. I mean, you use the mind skillful way. That's what the mind is for. But you give it over to actually what is happening. My teacher said if I could, concentrate all my teaching in just a few words, it would be with what is. And that's not only just be with the fact right in front of you, rather than what you want it to be. And the other is be with what is this unimaginable intelligence and wisdom at play. Unimaginable. Always. Constantly. And it's perfectly in place. I mean, look what COVID did. It knocked holes in every structure and belief system and organization, and it was astonishing, really. Not to diminish, the suffering that happened, but so let's take a break. What I'd like to explore a little bit in the guided meditation, and it's not like, I don't know how to say this. It's not like getting in touch with the inner child. It's like opening as you are, which is this loving, radiant, unconditional presence, the source of wisdom and the source of love. That's really what we are. Walking around in these costumes and masks and whatever, and playing out whatever roles. But the reality is, so the more you can open up as that and get that sense and wake that up in yourselves, and then invite that is not loved, not understood, rejected, isolated, hated, defended, whatever covering, bounding, binding we've lived with and have identified ourselves as, and really get an experiential sense of how just being this open, loving presence and inviting it in and listening and being available to and touching. What's happening is this open, spacious brilliance enters into a knot of love, but it's bound. That's all it is. It's just a bound knot. And by listening and touching and attending, it starts to permeate it, and it will reveal it. It will reveal it in a dream. It will reveal it in an insight. Sometimes they'll be like memories or like flashes of film. You experience that? And what that does, my friend, is give you the power to be with what's arising and what's to be loved, and therefore will come back to the home ground. It isn't a managing. We're taught so much in therapy how to manage. This is a dissolving, a resolution. No more. No more. It doesn't exist anymore. It never really did, except in a memory. So I'd like to kind of explore that together, because if you can take one thing home, you then, in your loving attention, can actually free up and liberate what has been the obscuration that said that you are not loving, that you have to be a certain way in order to fill in the blanks. Okay? So it's a little different guided meditation than we normally do.